Psychology Virtual Interactive Notebook 1, Day 5, Substance Abuse. At the top of your notes, title it Day 5, Substance Abuse. Your essential question is, how is substance abuse diagnosed? The main idea is substance abuse. The subtopics are defined, diagnoses, and categories. We're going to begin with substance abuse defined. So where does the use of a substance cross the line into abuse? This is a good definition. It's in your book. User uses more than originally intended, despite adverse consequences, and displays physical and psychological dependence. So your note for that will be user uses more than originally intended, despite adverse consequences, and displays physical and psychological dependence. This distinguishes it from casual users or abusers, I guess you would say. For example, you might know adults who frequently have a glass of wine with dinner, but you never see them drunk. They're not drinking and hiding when they do it. They're not getting DUIs. They're not getting in trouble for their behavior while using alcohol. Those people are not substance abusers by this definition. Substance abuse is a compulsive behavior, meaning the person feels like they have to do it, and they will continue to do it despite bad things happening as a result. And I don't mean to minimize that in any way. I've known people in my family, students at school who struggle with substance abuse, so I'm not trying to minimize that. It is in the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, Volume 5, and it's what mental health professionals use to diagnose mental illnesses. Let's move on to diagnoses. I looked up a good definition of diagnoses, and it is the art or act of identifying a disease from its signs and symptoms. So identifying a disease from its signs and symptoms. This book then definitely takes the disease model of substance abuse, which personally I feel is appropriate. I don't mean to take away the idea that people have free will and that people make choices, but once people are hooked, I mean, using the disease model to me at least makes sense. A person who wants to stop and can't has a mental health disorder, right? We're going to define two things under diagnosis, three things. All right, so let's have three arrows coming off of diagnosis. And the first arrow is going to point towards physical dependence. And physical dependence is defined as changes in bodily functions. So there are physical changes as the result of taking this substance over time. A person becomes physically dependent. And if they discontinue the substance, then they will have negative physical symptoms as a result. So the first arrow coming off of diagnosis is physical dependence. The second arrow coming off of diagnosis is psychological dependence. Psychological dependence means that the substance is used to manage psychological stress. There is an emotional need for the substance, and it is used to manage psychological stress. The third thing coming off of diagnosis is withdrawal. So if a person discontinues a substance and they have withdrawal symptoms, then that can help with the diagnosis. Am I addicted to this thing? Well, stop doing it or stop taking it, and let's see if you go through withdrawal. And if you go through withdrawal, then you were dependent on it. So withdrawal is defined as negative symptoms when drug use stops. Negative symptoms when drug use stops. I don't want to get too terribly personal here, but I'm a teacher and I've had a few thousand students come through. And in my time as a teacher, I've known students who had physical dependence and psychological dependence on a drug. I don't want to be too controversial, but I would say I've known lots of kids who use marijuana regularly, and when they get off marijuana, they typically describe the experiences. Now they have all this stress that they were managing with the marijuana, and they have a problem getting off it, but they don't generally describe as much physical withdrawal. Maybe Again, I don't want to be controversial. And I've known kids who have detoxed off of things like methamphetamine and heroin, and they talk about how they had really negative symptoms for the first days or weeks, and then a feeling of kind of blah, in addition to feeling like they couldn't manage their stress because they didn't have the stress management skills. That's why they were taking the drug. And that displays a difference between physical dependence and psychological dependence. And a person can have both. A person can be physically dependent on a drug and psychologically dependent on a drug. Yeah. All right. And I think that's all I have to say about that. Moving on to categories. You're going to do categories on your own. Go ahead and click on the link. This is Chapter 4, Section 4. And I'm just looking for very general information. So I will read what I've written in your instructions. What do the drugs in each category actually do? So what do depressants do? What do stimulants do? What do opioids do? And what do hallucinogens do? Take as many notes as you think you need to be able to answer those questions correctly on the test. And then for your output, I want you to draw a symbol for each drug category to help you remember what they do. And that is today's lesson. It was pretty short. Thank you very much.